I don't speak any Welsh. I speak Danish, I speak German. So we could make this an advanced session. I continue in German language maybe. Sorry for my accent. That's my English accent, is because in Austria we speak German language. Welcome to Do You Speak English? Localized reports in Power BI. And the solution I present is, because there is no solution in Power BI, right? I would love to just tell you there's this button you turn on and then everything is in different languages. But unfortunately there is not. And we will see that the way I came out with is an overcomplicated model, just to set expectation level here, right? So we talk about a lot of modeling and problems in modeling to make up a solution which works for any language, for any amount of language. So if somebody decides they want to add another language, they just add it in the data and everything works. So I don't have to change anything in the model. This was like the goal of the thing, and you will learn about my journey. So this was not like very straight, as you can imagine. So everything I show today is, of course, prepared and downsized to this talk, but this is a real use case. So one of my customers asked me, can we do multi-language reports in Power BI? I did a small research and said, yeah, we can do this. There's a lot of YouTube videos and blog posts. And then they asked me, yeah, now we do it, and then they discovered, oh, this doesn't work, and this is not what I expected. And so I had to come up with my own approach, and this is what I will talk today. So I hope you can appreciate that. And to set you in the situation how it is to look at a report where you understand the numbers but have no clue about the text, right? That's the situation people face who cannot speak the language. And maybe when I did this on Power BI Next Step, I think, a couple of years ago. I can't remember when it was. When I started with this report, I created it in Danish because I think there's not so many people speaking Danish, right? I speak Danish, so I could translate it on my own. But then I was invited to Denmark to present it, so I always translated it to Klingon now. So anybody in the room speaks Klingon and can read the text? You? 2 people? You earn a chocolate, of course. And when I did this presentation in Denmark, another one? Yeah, okay. When I did this presentation in Denmark, there was also one person raising their hand. And later on, then I asked something, I think I asked something about ducks, and everybody raised their hands. They knew it, and this person did not. And I said, you better have learned data preparation, and I really said it. And afterwards I thought, no, this is a no-go, right? And I didn't see the person afterwards. So if you know this person, tell him, say, excuse me, because this was not appropriate, yeah? But I couldn't see him. So I still think, when I present this, I still think about this poor guy where I made a fun of. So this is not a no-go, right? So what we see here, this is in, not in English, right? This is in Klingon. So you can tell us what this is, right? Sort of. I can't speak it. Yeah, you can't speak it. Okay, you just can read it. Okay, yeah. Okay, I see. So, so what I want that we can just click on this radio button down there. Everybody can see the radio button down there. So I've put a radio button there where then the report user can change the language, because that's the people who should decide on, right? Not we should decide on what's the language, but the people should decide on. So I change it to English, and then we see different things changed here. So the numbers are the same, of course, but the texts are different. So one thing is that the category names, so parts of my data, of my rows, so the product categories are translated into English. So this is one of the things we have to think of, like the content of the data. So we have data rows, dimensions, right? And then we want to translate them. But we also have things like constant text, which is suddenly not constant again, because it should be translated, right? So this is the second part, we will talk about it. There's also these page names which cannot be translated, so I cheated here. This is just buttons emulating the Power BI service view of the pages. So this is like cheating there. And there could also be like the currencies, but I will not talk about currencies. This is like easy or complex depending on, so the challenge here with currencies is how to find the right exchange rate for the date you think of. So somebody used like one currency rate per day or per month or whatever. There's a really good blog post out there, as you can imagine, from Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari at sequelbi.com, and they talk you through all the complexities there. Here in my model, I just use like one exchange rate for the currencies. I don't care about date or whatever, and then calculate it to the other exchange rate. That's what we did here. So when I looked this up, as I told you, like a customer approached me and they said, yeah. So I did my research, right? And then I had all these suggestions, and I'm showing them not to show you that they are not good. They just didn't things I did not expect. So I think this is really small, right? So one solution was about bookmarks. So you have like, when I change something, I press a button, right? Then I hide all my visuals in English and show the Klingon ones or the other way around. And I have a love and hate relationship with bookmarks because it's great that you can do something like that, but maintaining bookmarks, for me personally, it's a nightmare. I'm not made for like having overlapping things and then hiding and showing them, and then you have to remember that you only want to store some of the filters in the bookmark, and then you forget about it, and then you update the bookmark, and everything is. So this is not my way. And as I said, that means if there's a new language, I would have to duplicate all the bookmarks again for the other language. And I think the users should, they should maintain the translations, right? Why should I as a developer care about this? I want to build something which is data-driven. This is like my goal for all my projects. I try to make it data-driven. And I'm not the owner of the data, but one of the users are taking care of the data, right? So if somebody decides we want a new language, then they can just do it without me interfering. So I'm a bad consultant about that because I'm not earning money with that, but I just build a better user-friendly model. That's the goal here. The other one was expression paste. Yeah, again, then you have like a duck statement. Not sure, this is really small, really. So what it tells here is like a switch statement where then something, the selected language is then discovered. And if it's English, I return sales. And if it's not English, I return the Danish version of sales, right? Again, I would have to maintain a lot of DAX measures. Every translation goes through me as a developer. And I'm not the person who should be responsible for that. Then the other solution is about adding different columns. And I think, was it this one or the other one? I was really impressed what you can do in Power Query. So depending on some parameters, you could create these columns and hide the other ones, or you can do amazing things. But again, this means if I change the language, I have to refresh my report because it's a different Power Query parameter. Adding different columns, screwing up all my visuals. Again, I have to work with bookmarks because like if I change Danish, then all the English columns disappear and are not available. So I didn't like this solution from that perspective. What else did we have here? Power Query parameter, language table. Yeah, then I think the one with the language table, this bit me very, very hard when I built then the model. So like there was a YouTube video demonstrating, you can have this language table and you have this dimension table and you have the language in there as one of the fields, and then you filter it and everything is fine. So wow, that's the solution I'm up to. And then I added another dimension and tried to do the same thing. And the Power BI told me this is an ambiguous model. I cannot add another second dimension and filter it with the language. So this bit me very hard and it took some time to think about it. And and Microsoft's answer, this last point here, is always if you ask Microsoft, please give us multi-language reports in Power BI, they will tell you we already have a solution, metadata translation. But I think this is the wrong, this is a nice answer, but it's like just the wrong thing, because most of the users I work with, they don't care about the metadata. They don't even see the model, right? They see the reports and they see headlines and they see like what I present there. And of course, if you stick with the standard title, so if you add a visual, right, sales amount by category, it tells us sales amount by category. If you change the language, it will then change to Umsatz nach Kategorie, whatever language you put there. But none of my customer is satisfied with the standard header. So I've always changed this header, and I have to translate it again. So the metadata doesn't really work for my customers or my projects at least. So my solution has one pro, I think, and a lot of backdrafts because it's an overcomplicated data model. I already warned you about that. So let's see how this works. So the cool thing is that if I add something new language or new translations, new text and so on, I just add this to the data. So nothing has to be changed inside of Power BI or analysis services. It's the same thing, right? I actually built this as analysis services solution for my customer. The disadvantage or the contra is that if there's new text elements like headers, these things, I have to do something in Power Query to add those things. I can live with that because if there's new header, obviously somebody changed some, or I have to add something in the report, right? I have to edit and maintain the report anyways, so I can also live that I have to first refresh the data. So this is like a contra, but it's okay-ish. The really bad thing is this is an overcomplicated model, so maybe with huge amount of data, it might be slower than it should be. The biggest dimension table at my customer was 1 million rows, and it still was okay. So again, As always, it depends on several things. And what's really bad is about the pre-selection. So if you have a slicer and you put in like red and store it like that, and somebody changes then to Danish or Klingon or whatever, then the slicer stays at red, but red is not available in Klingon because it's a different name there. So this like could be confusing there. So it's a very good idea to not have pre-selected slicers. Or what we did at the customer is that this was an embedded solution. So this is embedded in the web application, and the web application decided on the language. So we could not. So the users do not choose some slicer within the Power BI report, but some settings outside of the Power BI report, inside of the application, and this decides on which language, and then the application decides on one of the some of the pre-selected things. So if I select English, it will pre-select red, for example, if this should be the default for everybody. If I select Klingon, it will select red and Klingon for me over the communication there. So this also can be solved sort of, but be aware of this is not a perfect solution. So your mileage may vary. I think this is the thing. So I will show you what I did, what I implemented there, and maybe even if you don't use this concrete solution, my hope is that you'll learn something new about data modeling or other functions there. So hopefully this is interesting for you. Localization is much more, of course, so I will concentrate on the first two things because I only got 50 minutes. So I will concentrate on how we can translate the content, the dimensional content, all the texts which should be in different languages, and all the text elements, so the headlines, buttons, whatever you put there, everything like this. Of course, this also includes like numerical content that we have to apply different exchange rates, or the settings in the model data, metadata, or how to change language in Power BI Desktop and the service. There's slides for that. I fully trust in you. If you read the slides and see the settings there, you will understand this. So I will emphasize the first two things because I think this is more complicated, what I think. So if I run out of time, and I will run out of time, I already know that, that I showed you the important stuff first, right? And the rest you can see over the slide deck. So textual content, that would be really the core, right? We have product names, and the product names have English names, and Klingon names, and Danish names, and German names, and whatever. And the user wants to decide on to watch them consume them in which language. So first thing we need, of course, we need a dimension for that, so we can fill and propagate the slicer, right? For the radio button or whatever you want to have there. The second thing is that I come up with a table, and this table contains I'm not coming up with a table. I use the existing dimension table, and for the existing dimension tables, I add another row there. I add another column for the language, so I duplicate all the dimensional values. So so category 1 would be then appearing 2 times in the table if I have 2 languages, right? And we have to translate this. So in the first approach here, I will show you, I will just type into Excel to make it easy here. For the other demo, hopefully we can come up to that, I will demonstrate cognitive services. So you can translate things with cognitive services as you want in Power Query, for example. And then we need a bridge table. Why do we need a bridge table? Because if I have category 1, the fact table, right, is referencing category 1, for example, ID 1. But if I have 2 languages, then 1 appears 2 times, right? Once with the English text and once with the German text or Welsh text or whatever. So this is not unique anymore. We end up with a many-to-many relationship. That's why I think we overcomplicate the model, right? What usually is a one-to-many relationship, a dimension to the fact table, is now a many-to-many relationship because we duplicate all the IDs there. So we get a composite key, so to speak. And this is what I use. I use the bridge table for that. And then we need to set the relationship, right? We come to that, and I think that's it. Then, and then we can, or we must use TREATAS, as we will find out, and you can also do this with a calculation group. And kudos to Bernard Agullo when I did a demonstration of that in a webcast. I can't remember, maybe it's 4 years ago, I can't remember. He suggested calculation group, which is also a smart idea, of course. As we will see, there will be more complicated ducks. Yeah, pre-saved filters will not work, and this is the first demo. So I have this report here, the same report we just have seen in the slide deck, right? So we have the numbers, so we see this is a number of 2, this is a number of 1, but we can't actually read, I can't read those things and not pronounce it and don't understand them. And then I can change between those languages, just putting English, and everything is nice and crisp, right? I get those pages which just buttons, I have the text in there and everything else. So let's introduce a new language, right? So I can first demonstrate what's the outcome of that, and maybe that motivates you to keep your attention on this overcomplicated model. So let's jump to my data source, and of course the data source of preference is always Excel, right? That's what we like in Power BI. And the first table is a fact table. I have an ID there. That's not very important, but we have like these 2 dimensions, right? The dimensional IDs here, and I have those 2 amounts, right? Very, 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 very simple demo model. So dimension 1, I have the English version of the text, and then I also have like the Klingon text version, and I just copy and paste this, right? And then I want to translate this to Welsh, and I think Welsh is CY, right? And then I have to look this up. I don't speak any Welsh. If you want to help me, it would not help me because I'm sure I cannot write it down, so I will just look up here. So we have like the house, and this should be house in Welsh, right? Don't even try to pronounce this. And then we have the chair, which is almost chair, right? And if I'm wrong, I don't want to insult anybody here. Okay, and the dimension 2 is then the colors. So again, I use this as Welsh and put in and duplicate once more the colors I'm having here. So red and blue. Class, okay. Last but not least, I also have to add Welsh here, so this should be Welsh, right? Hope I write this right. Then I save everything. I close Excel, otherwise I cannot refresh my report, jump over to my report, and then do the refresh, and if you're lucky, there should be now Welsh appearing in my radio button, and I can change between the languages, and I should see the nice column chart in this language. Yeah, now Welsh also appears, now everything is translated to Welsh. Just wondering why this is also translated. I didn't expect this one. Okay, okay. Just wanted to tell you that that's interesting. That's interesting, yeah? Okay, we will find out during the demo why this is also translated now. So I just wanted to tell you that only like these are translated. What's like a bad thing is, again, because this is colors, right? So this, I think, what was it? No, it's not open anymore. Can we change back? So this is blue, but this should be red. So we have to make sure that this is also red. Unfortunately, this is a manual thing, unless you're using like DAX meshes to come up with the colors, right? But usually it's not so big of an issue in which color the things appear. So jump in here. Can I find my way? This is still in the February release, so no on-object formatting, and I can't find my way here. The colors, yeah, columns. Yeah, thank you very much. So this should be then in sort of red, right? Okay, so how does this work? Like this part, I don't know how this works, if there's any question, but I can tell you how this works. So the thing is, if we just use normal meshes, we would end up with something like that. Again, we can change the colors here. So this would be really bad for several reasons, right? One is, this one, right? So one is that now we see like all the, independent of which language I select, I see all the things in all languages, which is confusing enough, but also the data is duplicated. So instead of a value of 2, we see a value of 6 here. 2 times 3, right? And a value of 3 here, 1 times 3. So this would be really, really bad, right? So we cannot show a report like that. And I would expect that like some filtering is available here. So my first thinking was, of course, I go to the data model, and if you look at this data model, you can see what's happening there. Like I have this language here, right? And I have a relationship to the dimension over this language key, or language ID, and also there. But this is an inactive relationship, right? So that's the reason why it's not filtering. So why I have inactive relationships? just activate these relationships. And I already told you I can activate this relationship, right? Everything is fine. So if you now jump back, one of the languages should be filtered correctly, right? So we see now the chair and the house, but still the numbers are too high because the other dimension is not filtered right by the, now by the language. So I can also go there and then activate this one. No, I can't. It's coming up with this awful message telling me I cannot create this relationship because I would introduce ambiguity, right? So something, there would be multiple paths in the model, and I didn't really get it from first, but if you think about, the thing is from the language, now there's a filter to the dimension, right? There's a filter over the bridge table to my fact table, but there could also be a path the other way around. The Power BI says, I don't know how I should filter the fact table by this language table. I know it, we don't care, right? I mean, it's not an issue because I have all the languages in both dimensions, but for some reason Power BI says, no, you cannot do that. So I could not use the relationships, and that's why I keep them inactive. So the next approach was, you know how we can activate relationships in DAX, inactive relationships? Yeah, somebody shaking their hands? Use relationship, yes, or user relationship, as Patrick usually says, right? The guy in the cube. So use relationship, that's the way how we usually activate inactive relationships. If you have multiple relationships to activate one of those. So I tried this, but it doesn't work. So another stopper, showstopper here. So if we go to my fact table, I think I have the sales in here. This would be the right one, right? So I could just go there and ask for, please, I think no, I already have it there, right? There's another one here. So I have this use relationship. Right? So I want to calculate, let's zoom in here. So I ask for, please, there's an inactive relationship between the language ID and the language ID of the language table and the dimension 1 table. There's another inactive relationship between the language and the dimension 2 table. Please activate this, right? But if you try so, not sure if you ever tried, we get this weird error message telling us that, that's very interesting, no error message right now, right? Usually there's an error message, so something changed obviously in the model. So usually it tells me, again, it's an ambiguous model, because at one point in time there cannot be two active relationships ending up with ambiguity. Usually this works because if you have one active relationship and several inactive relationships, and you activate the inactive relationship with a use relationship, implicitly, automatically, the active relationship is deactivated without asking for. So that's very interesting, what this does for me. Obviously, I did not run this through the last February release. So let's see how this works in here. So I'm not sure. If you're not learning anything in this talk, I learned something, obviously. So let's put in there. No, it doesn't work. Okay. Then we get this like, yeah, okay. We get the error message in here. Now we get this ambiguous path again. So there cannot be two active relationships walking this path because Power BI doesn't know what to do here. Okay, now I'm relieved that we got this error message. So then I thought, what else? I mean, I went through many different things. I went through row level security, yeah, using like a role for every user, and then this filter is applied because row level security is like one level underneath the data model. So I can have a filter applied on dimension 1 and dimension 2 on something. Maybe I derive from this user culture measure, but the backdraft with the row level security here is one thing. I mean, it's security, right? It's not supposed to be something the user changes there. And the second thing is, it locks in the user to one language. The user cannot change the language unless he or she changes the roles to the security role. And the third thing is, row level security is not applied to like contributors, members, or admins. So if I look at the report, even if I'm a member of one of the roles, I always see like these weird numbers, yeah? Like these numbers. And it's hard to prove for me if this report makes sense, right? Because I always see all the languages independent of what I want to select. So this solution I did not want to use. Maybe I have time, then I can also show there's one way which is really cool, but it's only the report. You could also like synchronize slicers. Anybody of you ever tried synchronizing slicers? I mean, not over pages, I mean one slice on the same page, another slice on the same page, and they are in sync. So slices on different values, yeah, again, yeah? Wow, very cool, very cool. So with this, you can say I have a filter on the language code for dimension 1, I have another slicer for the language code on dimension 2, and I then group those together. So if I change one of the slices, the other will change exactly. Backdraft here is one, it's a solution on the report, right? So I cannot provide in the data model. I have to think about this in every report. If somebody uses Analyze in Excel, this will not work maybe for them. And the other thing is that, now I lost my idea. The other thing is, usually I use like a language code, like number 1, 2, 3, or like EN or DE or whatever, but not like a full name for the language. When I filter directly on the ID, of course I only show like the ID instead of a full name. So it's hard to change, or I would not use very long names there. Okay, so what's the solution then I came up with here? And the solution is that I use this overcomplicated model, right? So one thing that why I think this is overcomplicated is because of the bridge table in between. So we duplicate rows in the dimensions. That's what I think is overcomplicated. And the other thing is I need this bridge table. So I have this bridge table in between, which has this unique values per dimension 1, for example, and then I have a filter or a relationship, a one-to-many relationship towards the dimension 1, and a one-to-many relationship towards the fact. And to make the filter possible propagated from the dimension 1 to the fact table, I have to make this like a bidirectional filter. So what I would like to have is like to turn the filter just around, because I'm not caring about, I don't want to have bidirectional filter, right? I don't care about this filter should be propagated in this direction. I only want to have a filter like swimming upstream from the dimension against the usual stream, right? But the only way I can do is a bidirectional filter here. So this would be one of the rare use cases where bidirectional filters are okay, and the only solution. So I have this filter propagated from dimension 1 to the fact over the bridge table. But what about these solutions here? So in the full solution, I just deleted those. I just have them here because I wanted to demonstrate the use relationship thing that it doesn't work. So what I need is I have to apply this filter from the language table to the dimensions. And what I came up with is this nice function called TREATAS. So when I first heard about it, I think this is big enough, right? TREATAS. When I first heard about it, obviously more than 4 years ago, I thought it's a Greek goddess, like TREATAS or something, but it's TREATAS. Yeah? Unfortunately, we don't do Pascal case or something, so it's called TREATAS. And what it means is take whatever the content of this table expression is and apply the values from this expression onto this column. So treat this column as there would be a filter applied to this column. So this is more complicated as it maybe should be. So starting here, so this is the usual measure, right? I take the amount and then I multiply it by the exchange rate, and then I apply 2 extra filters in the calculate, right? We're changing the filter context, the current filter context, and this is done over variables, just to make, I think the code is easier to read if I split this up. So I have these variables here where I apply this TREATAS, and this is what I applied in there. And this language ID is another variable up there where I ask for, please give me the selected language from the language ID, so the content of the radio button, in case the user forgot about having a selection or the report author forgot about putting in a slicer, then maybe several rows are selected. So this is why I use then English as a default. So if nothing is selected or more values are selected, I use English as default. And this is then applied on dimension 1 and dimension 2. Now I don't have a relationship. I just put in a filter directly on these dimensions, on these languages, and this works. And so this is the solution. I get all the numbers right as I want. So if I now put in my sales instead of the sales symbol, now I get everything right again, and depending on what kind of language I'm choosing, everything is as it should be. Any question at this point in time about this? Online? I know it's late, right? Okay. So the second, I think, now I've got 20 minutes, right? Very good. So the second thing is that I want to show you how I can translate these ones, and I'm not sure why this is already translated. I didn't run through with the Welsh language. So is this Welsh? Can anybody confirm what kind of language this is? I'm just wondering about the name, to be honest. Trosolk Vertiant. I also have this blank row there. Yeah? So something is what do you say? Wrong in the state of Denmark, right? Something like that. Let me see again my thing in here. I would not expect that there's any translation for the text components there, but maybe I forgot something. Yeah, so this is only available in English, right? But somehow it's already available in Welsh and another language we don't know, right? So let's take a look how I did this. And we jump over to Power Query. Well, let's start here first. So what I did here is that I have for the text components, so this one, this is not really a text box because I cannot type, I could type in the text, but it's then fixed to the text I have here. So in reality, this is a button, right? Or something like that. Or what is it? It is a color. Now it's a card visual, right? And this card visual, I have this sales overview thing. Obviously it's a column. So I can find this as a column in a table called text component. They have a row or a column here, sales overview. And obviously, depending on what kind of language I'm choosing, the content of this column changes, right? So this is how I treat the fixed text things, text components, I call them. So how can I feed these things? When I only have like English text in my model, well, I'm always jumping out. So the text component looks like this. So I have a data source. The data source is, starting point for everything here, is my text component table. So again, this is my Excel file, and here I have everything like flat. There's a row in this table telling me that the component, so maybe I jump further so we see the promoted headers and the change data type. So I see like there's something I later want to call sales overview, and the content should be sales blank overview for English. If it's in Danish, I have another row, Danish, and then again sales overview exactly the same thing, but then it will like be sales in Danish. Then I added the languages here. So I combine this with my language table, and then I expand this language table to get all the other languages in there. Maybe that's the thing here. I now see why this is working. I just recently changed my logic here and I forgot about it. So my language table contains, right? My language table contains not only English but also Klingon. This is like the international code for, or whatever. Is it international? This would be like universal, right? If it's Klingon. Code for Klingon and Welsh. Right? And now I have like everything duplicated here. So I have like all my English, like my 2 rows of English translated as also now in combinations with like all the texts are now combined also with all the other languages. In the next step, I call the translate API. The translate API, this is now cognitive services. So I call cognitive services. How call I cognitive services? I use, I call in here, where is it here? Let's take a look here. So what I'm doing here is I'm checking if the language ID matches. I have to make this bigger, right? Nobody can read this. Zoom in here. So I'm checking here. If the language ID, which is the column at the very beginning, matches the destination language, then I do nothing, right? Because if I have the text in English, I don't need to call cognitive services to tell me what the text is in English. It was like spending money for nothing. We don't do that. As much as we like Microsoft earning money, right? But we do not want to spend money for nothing. In the other cases, I call this translate API function. So there's a function here in Power Query, and then pass in, as you can see here, the display text. So display text is this column, and pass in the language I want to translate into, this one. So I get these records here. So the record now looks like for English, it's empty, right? That's what I would expect here, because English to English translation is just empty. For another language, Klingon, I get the translations here. So I get a text and the language it was translated into. So this is a use case for cognitive services. If you don't speak the language, then you can use this. Then expand this translate API, so get all the text here. But of course, I don't get anything for the English text, because I didn't call the API for that. So then we have to find a logic that replace the translations, right? So if the translation is null, then I just take the English version. I remove all the columns I don't need. So we stick now with the text component column, sales overview, for example, the different destination languages, and the translations. I rename the column here and change the type. And what I then do is, because this is nice, right? But working with unpivoted data like this, I want to have like pin a sales overview column to a visual or to the header, right? I don't want to like have a DAX thing which is then filtering down to the rows I need. So I want to have a column for it. So that's why I pivot and everything. So I pivot everything. So I get now 3 rows for my 2 columns, because I have two text components, right? So sales overview in English is sales blank overview. Sales overview, I fully trust the API here. I don't know, anybody speaks Welsh? Can you? Okay, nobody? So we just believe this is right, hopefully. That Troswolf and Vertheant is like sales overview, right? And then the Klingon version. So cognitive services can be of help here. Be aware of that cognitive services called every single time you refresh your data model. So everything you already translated today, and to press the refresh button, it's again called cognitive services. So for this demo, of course, it's cheap, but if you have a lot of text, maybe you find a solution like, I think there's like ideas of a data warehouse or something, maybe you heard about that, where you could like store things and then have a logic only to call the API for new rows, right? This could be an idea here. Okay, and this is how I get like the Welsh things in there, and they're just, as I mentioned, I think I had, previously I had like this different Power Queries, right? This is what I did previously, where I had one query per language, which I didn't really like, so I reworked this, and now I was surprising myself that this is automatically done, depending on the language table. The Translate API, talking about this, so what you can see here, for this API, you need an API key. And I made this a parameter for 2 reasons. Because if it's not a parameter and I show you the code, you could see my API key. And then you could translate on my costs. And that's something I don't like. I mean, I like everybody of you, but I would not like that you translate on my costs, on my budget. And the other thing is, if, and this happens sometimes, I move the mouse cursor over in a web recording, right? And then first just this tooltip comes over and everybody sees the full string, I have to change it. And it's easy for me to just find all my Power Query parameters and change the API key instead of like opening up the advanced editor and see all the steps. So that's the reason why I would recommend also doing a parameter and change the API key. It's like a password, right? Treat the API key as a password. So now you see like the first letters, and now you can like sit all day and night to like find out the rest of the letters if you want. I nearly touched it, right? Could you see it? That I almost moved my mouse over. So I'm really lucky that I didn't really. So, and then the advanced editor. I think everybody of you know why this is called advanced editor. Because you have to be an advanced user to be able to use it. I mean, it got better, right? So this Translate API is a function which takes 2 parameters, the text and the language, and this is what I then reference. So the API asks us to do, I think this is something, JSON, I'm not a really expert about that. So I think I took this just from the Microsoft documentation. So you can see all the content there. And instead of like, put your text here, or like, it would like say, put your API key here, I just put not hard-coded API key here, but put in my parameters to run everything. And basically what it does, it like puts together a JSON file, sends this JSON file over, where is it? Over the web content. Yes, this is calling the API, actually the API, with the language I want to translate to, with the API key. The body, where's the body? The body should appear also somewhere here, because that's why I put the body together. Can't see it right now. Then what you get back is again a JSON document, which you then deserialize to just get like the first column, the first row from it. That should be the translation, and that's what I'm returning to Power Query. Any questions about that? Right, I'm really talking very fast today, or I just forgot about very important stuff, because usually it takes me like 70 minutes instead of 50 minutes, and I just used 40 minutes. Very good, very good. So the other options we're having is, let me think about, row level security. That's the one I just talked you through before, is that you could use like the row level security. So depending on what kind of user looking at the data, we would see different languages. So the selection should not be done. Let me see here. What are my user table? My user table is in here. 10 minutes to go, yes. Thank you. The users table. And then I have different users, which I then assign to different roles in their standard language. They put me like Fritz would everything see everything in German, James in English, Jens in Danish, and Koloth, I believe I found this name, it's a Klingon name, in whatever other language. And then you could build, of course in the modeling, you can build up the roles. I have then a role, let me think which one we use here, the username, I think this would be this one, where I then put in, let's zoom in here. Right. So there's a role called username, and this would then look up the username, find the language ID for the user, and apply it on the language ID of the dimension 1 and dimension 2 and so on. And of course there's also like a filter in there. Where is it? The user? Yeah. So the user table is filtered by the username, and from the user table, the filtered user table, I get then the language ID and apply it. And I would love if Microsoft would build something like this, just in between. So I'm not using row level security, but having a filter being applied on different tables without the model complaining about this ambiguity. That's what I'm looking for. I put it on already on ideas.powerbi.com. So if you want to upvote it, maybe they build something like that. I think there's still a lot of votes needed there. So this would be one way. You could also use, instead of the actual role, you could also have, let me find here, manage roles. User culture, right? So again, zoom in here. So for the language tables, I don't have a user table. I just use the language table and filter it on the user culture. And the user culture is then EN-US, for example. So I'm losing the left two letters because this is how I store the IDs, right? To filter the language ID. And again, I do the same thing. I apply those filters on all my dimensions. But again, it's row level security. It's meant for security, not for actual filtering. And everybody who is contributor, member, or admin rights is not able to see the true numbers, but like a mixture of all the languages, which is not very helpful. The other solution is this synced filter. So what I have here is that I have different slices, right? So again, zoom in here. So I have one slice on the language ID, another slice on the language ID, another slice on the language ID. The first one is apparently, I think I zoom in here, is on the language table. The second one is again on the language ID, but from dimension 1. And the third one is on the language ID of the dimension 2. And you can keep them in sync, like on slices on one page, as many of you already know, but for everybody else, it's under View, and then I have this sync slicers, and it's hidden. As always, the interesting stuff is hidden in the advanced options. So that's advanced options, and you can put in, I mean, there's interesting options there, but the important part here is you can put in any text as you want. So I call it language. And I made sure that I put in the same text for the other slicers. And this makes the trick. If I change one of the slicer, the content, the selection will be applied to all the other slices within the same group, no matter on which page or on the same page. So that means if I now change from Klingon to English, you will see that all the others change as well, or to Welsh or whatever. So they're in sync within several slices, which are on different columns in your data model. So this is sort of cool, maybe something useful for different other settings, or for these languages. The backdraft is we have the codes in here. We don't have really a name unless you store like English or German or Klingon in every of your dimension tables, right? This works brilliantly, but just this, yeah, another solution there. Let's jump back to the slides. Yeah, TREATAS. So TREATAS is this function called TREATAS. This is just for myself, because I thought it's TREATAS, right? And the syntax here is you have an expression which returns a table, and then you apply the content of the table, all the columns, or the rows you get on different columns. If the table returns not only one column, but two columns, you can provide two columns as the second and third parameter, and will also be applied. So this is how you can use TREATAS. Somebody say that like this creates a virtual relationship, so there's no real relationship in the data model because we don't have any relationship. I mean, we have this inactive relationship, but you could even delete this inactive relationship, and it's just applying a filter. And maybe you work with Vertipack analyzer or something, then you would see that like the relationships actually occupy some memory and space in your data model because Power BI is sort of building an index on the relationships for speeding up the filter propagation from one table to the other. So if you don't have a relationship, that means that this index is not there. So potentially the TREATAS will be slower. So use this with care. That's the important thing here because there's no materialized index exactly. And you find about TREATAS, of course, at the DAX guide. So TREATAS, virtual relationship, your physical relationship might be envy, sort of, yeah. So you might pay a penalty on using TREATAS alone. So the story is don't still build all your active relationships, right? And not think about we don't build any relationship at all because I can use TREATAS. This could come with a penalty. Yeah, text elements. I think that's why I was so fast because I jumped directly into the demo. There's everything here. So what I built here, so I have this table with all the text elements in one language, English for example. I pivot then the table and use this then in the dynamics text. So with if fx, or you could also like build measures returning like the row from this table. And then you can also hide pages and use buttons instead. This is what I did in here. Where is it? So this is just buttons, right? It's just, there's no, I mean, within Power BI Desktop we don't have pages, right? We only have this in Power BI Service, but this is how you could emulate this behavior. Cognitive services, I think this is wrong. Now it's over 100 languages you can translate from and to, like even Klingon. And I already showed you that. The numerical content is like to have exchange rates, very, very important of course, but this would be, I think this would be a talk on its own because this can be very complex, like finding the right currency rate for it, like was it when it was booked or when it was sold or when it was delivered. There's a lot of complexity there. And there's already this cool blog post from either Alberto or Marco. And the metadata, again, is a cool thing that we can do this, but my clients don't care about the metadata because they just look at the reports, so it doesn't really make sense. And is anybody using metadata translations? I'm really curious about that. Okay? Can you see afterwards? I'm just curious about what's the use case. Yeah, I just talked in the break that he's using it like because users can be very picky what kind of names they expect, and he doesn't like these names. So what he uses metadata translation for is that he names all the stuff in a name which makes sense for himself. So like he chooses Afrikaans or whatever, and hoping for that Afrikaans is never used, and therefore then having something where an engineer can work with the data model because this makes sense as a naming from an engineer's perspective. But for the end users, they would have like the default language, something like that could be also useful. Pardon? Yeah. And there's also tools available where you can do all the translations. Yeah. And in Power BI Desktop, and this is easy, you will find the settings in the browser. You will find the settings for Power BI Desktop, how to set the languages. Don't think it's necessary to demonstrate those features. It's just part of everything. So consider that there's some limitations. Maybe, for example, the decimal separator is always taken from the browser settings, so you cannot change this behavior. So the user has to actively change and choose the right format in the browser settings, which usually defaults to the operating system, right? Expression-based formatting is not always supported. So we still have this FX button not at all the places, unfortunately. And TREATAS is creating something, makes your measures more complicated, but if you use calculation groups, it can be easier again, because you use one calculation groups where you put in calculate, selected measures, put all the TREATAS stuff in there, and this is what you just activate in the reports. Yeah, the pre-selection has side effects, be aware of that. And unfortunately, there's no one-stop shop for all the settings, so there's different places in the browser, in Windows, and everywhere. So it could be easier. So, call to action, look at the solutions I posted like on the first slide. Look at my solution, what I came up with, implement whatever works for you. All of them have different backdrafts, so there's no exact thing, and there's a lot of ideas. Please upvote them. Maybe we can turn Microsoft to put something more easier in there into the product. And this is what I open up for question, and I have 9 minutes to go, right? No? I've just finished. Perfect. Wow. Very cool. So if you want to see me around, I will be in Power BI Summer School, just making some advertisement for that. So summer, being on the beach, talking about Power BI. Yeah, maybe you're interested, then you grab one of these. Thank you very much. So if there are any questions, please just come to me, and everybody else, have a nice party tonight.